The African continent saw a significant increase in coups in the last 3 to 4 years, with military figures carrying out takeovers in Gabon, Niger, Burkina Faso, Sudan, Guinea, Chad and Mali. Now it is important for us to understand that a coup is an illegal attempt by the military or other elites within the state to unseat the sitting executives. Before a coup is executed, the perpetrators target the sitting executives. They also must have a formal ties. Before we proceed, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more historical content. Niger. On the 24th of July 2023, the military announced that they had overthrown President Mohamed Bazoum. General Abdourahmane Tiani becomes the new strongman of the country. The Economic Community of West African States (ECOWAS) announced on 10 August its intentions to deploy a regional force to restore constitutional order while continuing to favor the diplomatic route.
Ce jour, 26 juillet 2023, nous, forces de défense et de sécurité, réunis au sein du Conseil national pour la sauvegarde de la patrie, CNSP, avons décidé de mettre fin au régime que vous connaissez. Cela fait suite à la dégradation continue de la situation sécuritaire, la mauvaise gouvernance économique et sociale, les frontières terrestres et aériennes sont fermées jusqu'à la stabilisation de la situation.
The military proposes a transition period of 3 years, maximum, before returning power to the civilian. Burkina Faso, 2 putschs in 8 months. On the 24th of January 2022, President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore was ousted from power by the military. Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba was inaugurated president in February. September 30th of the same year, Damiba was in turn dismissed from his position by the military. Captain Ibrahim Traoré was invested as transitional president until a presidential election scheduled for July 2024. Sudan, the 15th of October, 2021.
The military has arrested several civilian ministers and officials.
Thousands of people have taken to the streets to protest against Monday's military coup.
This guy, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has taken control and kicked out the prime minister. People are really angry. They're back on the streets like they were 2 years ago. That's when they brought down a president they blamed for 30 years of oppression. So what's going on? Who's who in all of this? And where does Sudan go from here? Okay, first, let's wind things back and talk about Omar al-Bashir. He took power in a military coup in 1989 and ruled Sudan for the next 30 years. But 2 years ago, people finally turned on him. Women, young people, Sudanese from across the country had had enough. And when it became clear that al-Bashir's days were numbered, the army, which had propped him up for so long, turned on him too, and he was out. But it wasn't quite the people's victory that all those protesters had wanted, because the army seized power and replaced Bashir with something called the Transitional Military Council, the TMC. So as far as the protesters were concerned, the revolution wasn't over.
People, they came, they set up their tents, and they just refused to leave in front of the army headquarters. And their demands was very clear that we want the military to hand in the government to the civilians. And we want to move towards democracy, and we want to move towards peace.
But there was nothing peaceful about what happened next. Live now to the Sudanese capital, Khartoum. That is the scene. More than 100 people were killed in what became known as the Khartoum Massacre.
Armed forces attacked the protesters with live ammunition.
It was a horrific situation. People's bodies were thrown into the Nile. Women and men were sexually assaulted and raped.
But still, the protesters kept up the pressure, and it worked. Eventually, the military agreed to share power. So, The military leaders, the TMC, made a deal with the group that basically represented the protesters. That's the FFC, the Forces of Freedom and Change. They agreed to share power for 39 months in a new transitional government and then hold elections. Both sides had seats on a joint committee called the Sovereign Council. That was led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. Remember, he's the guy who just led the coup. There was also a civilian cabinet led by Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok. Now, for a while, it looked like Sudan was on track and transitioning towards democracy. But that transition was completely derailed by what happened in late October, when General al-Burhan decided to seize power. He dissolved the Sovereign Council, pushed out the Prime Minister, and declared a state of emergency.
It's a naked, brutal power grab. What he is trying to do is to tear up the aspirations of the Sudanese people as expressed in the 2019 revolution.
Okay, but why now? Well, that whole power-sharing arrangement was on pretty shaky ground from the start.
The military were never comfortable with sharing power with the civilians. So the grudge was there.
Having two parts of the government that are not actually in agreement, in terms of their political agenda, in terms of their ultimate goals, has been extremely problematic.
So that's the context. A major rivalry between the two sides that was just getting worse and worse. But there was something else going on too. A looming deadline for General al-Burhan to step down as chairman of the Sovereign Council. Some people reckon that also helps to explain the timing of this coup.
3 or 4 weeks before Burhan was supposed to hand over his chair to a civilian one. That's why he decided to turn the tables against everyone.
And stepping down would have put the civilian side in a stronger position to make some big moves, like handing over the former president Omar al-Bashir to the International Criminal Court. He's facing charges linked to the conflict in Darfur, a conflict that some of those military leaders, like al-Burhan, were involved in too. Or another big move, pushing ahead with a proper investigation into the military's role in the Khartoum massacre.
They were never really going to investigate themselves enough for the massacres of June 2019.
The military has full control now. So what does that mean for Sudan? Well, for the economy, it's definitely bad. Sudan was on its way to getting $50 billion in debt relief, and there were promises of even more international aid. But most of that was tied to Sudan's democratic transition, and now that that's in doubt, so is the money.
We have had debt rescheduling, debt relief, the lifting of the state sponsors of terror designation, the beginnings of economic normalization, and that can be credited to the civilian leadership, and especially to Abdallah Hamdok. Now, there is no chance that the United States, the European Union, the World Bank, etc., are going to come in and say, oh, we don't mind having the democratic transition torn up.
Now, General al-Burhan actually says he's still committed to that transition. He said the whole reason he took control was to correct the path of the revolution, as he put it, and that the military was forced to act because of all the political infighting.
انقلب التراضي المتزن إلى صراع بين مكونات الشراكة. قاد بلادنا ومكوناتها المختلفة إلى انقسامات تنزل بخطر وشيك يهدد أمن الوطن.
He says he's going to set up a technocratic government and hold elections in 2023. But people just aren't buying it.
This is all, window dressing, just to negate the fact that this is a military regime.
And so for many in Sudan, it's feeling like 2019 all over again.
تم الانقلاب الأول. الرسالة دار نوصلها للعالم مش هو الثورة انتمت لبرهان، برهان انتمى للثورة وقال أنا هحمي ثورة. هل بالله عليك دي حماية؟ دي حماية ثورة.
We can't predict what might happen next in Sudan. Several people have already been killed in the protests that followed the latest coup, and there's definitely a lot of fear. But there's also some hope. The idea that people power has changed things before, and it might again.
The people in the street, the people who managed to start the civil disobedience without any central leadership, but basically their faith in their right to have a government that is held accountable to them. And that tells me that there's just no way we're going to have a military rule in the long term.
Guinea, the 5th of September 2021. President Alpha Condé was overthrown by a military coup on the 1st of October. Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya became president. The military has promised to return the place to elected civilian by the end of 2024. Mali. 2 coups in 9 months. On the 18th of May 2021, President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta was overthrown by the military. A transitional government was formed in October. On the 24th of May 2021, the military arrested the president and prime minister. Colonel Assimi Goïta was inaugurated in June as transitional president. The junta has committed to returning the place of civilians after the elections scheduled for February 2024. That brings us to the end of this video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more historical content.